In Peru, social movements from different regions continue to mobilize peacefully towards Lima as part of the March of los Cuatro Suyos to demand, among other things, President Dina Boluarte's resignation. In Mexico, authorities declared an alert in the northern region following heavy rains and snowfalls resulting in the death of at least 4 people. And in Malawi, several schools reopened after being closed due to a cholera outbreak. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Social organizations from different regions of Peru continue advancing towards Lima to participate in the March of the Four Suyos and demand the resignation of President Dina Boluarte. Local mayors report that an indefinite strike in the region of Apurimac has been going on for 14 days with constant social mobilization in defense of Pedro Castillo. The former president has been detained since December 7, 2022, when he was dismissed by parliament and accused of alleged rebellion. In localities such as Andahuaylas and Uripa, the population remains on the streets with blockades at several road points. Besides the resignation of Dina Boluarte, demonstrators also demand immediate elections, the convening of a constituent assembly, and the closing of Congress. On the Monday, the Peruvian justice system admitted the habeas corpus request filed in favor of former President Pedro Castillo, which seeks to annul his 18-month pretrial detention. According to local media, Judge Jorge Luis Ramirez Niño de Guzman accepted to consider the request made by the defense of the former Peruvian president, who is currently under arrest at the Barbadillo prison east of Lima. Castillo's legal team seeks to overrule the Congress resolution that lifted the former head of state legal guarantees that are inherent to the presidency without having carried out a constitutional accusation. The resolution of the Peruvian Congress against Pedro Castillo allowed the legislative body to remove him from office without being tried or having the possibility of defending himself against the accusation of alleged moral incapacity. In Brazil, 39 people remain in custody for the vandalism and violence acts carried out by Bolsonaro supporters in their coup attempt against the government of President Lula da Silva on January 8th. According to the prosecutor's office, the suspects linked to the riots against the government headquarters must answer for 6 crimes, among which are attempted coup d'etat, criminal association, and damage to national patrimony. The Deputy Attorney General, Carlos Frederico Santos, presented the accusation at the request of the President of the Senate, Rodrigo Pacheco. The official also requested that the accused remain in custody in order to prevent new violent crimes against the democratic state. In Bolivia, President Luis Arce highlighted that despite the global economic slowdown, tax collection in the country grew by 17% in 2022. This means tax collection reached 32,239 billion in domestic currency during the past year. The president released this information through his social networks, detailing that economic indicators of 2021 had been surpassed. A little over 2 years after President Arce assumed the office, this growth shows the current dynamism of the Bolivian economy after the reactivation policies applied since November 2020. In this context, the Bolivian executive expresses gratitude to the people for the work and effort that have allowed this increase in the economic development. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador said on his morning briefing Tuesday that WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange should be released, as he had promised to WikiLeaks' current editor-in-chief prior to his meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden. Andrés Manuel López Obrador advocated for the release of Julian Assange, who has spent the last 4 years in a British maximum security prison in London. Assange is battling a possible extradition to the U.S., where he would be tried on 17 espionage counts under an espionage law that has never been applied to journalists. The Mexican president noted that while Assange, if tried, could be sentenced to 175 years in prison for releasing factual information, the New York Times, where he published, has suffered no consequence whatsoever. On Monday, Ecuador's government ordered judicial and law enforcement authorities to investigate alleged corruption in state-owned companies. President Guillermo Lasso sent a letter to the state Attorney General's office and instructed the Ministry of Government and the police to locate Hernan Luque and Ruben Cherres and bring them to justice. The president's letter came after new evidence was revealed regarding alleged irregularities in contracts within the electricity sector. Lasso warned that cooperation with Interpol would be activated in case both suspects are currently out of the country. According to local media, the corruption scandal in Ecuador reaches the president's closest officials and could even involve his brother-in-law, Danilo Carrera. The 5th International Conference for World Balance will take place in Cuba at the Havana Convention Palace from January 24th to the 28th. More than 360 presentations will be made during the conference, and so far around 1,023 delegates from 82 countries have registered. Likewise, the event will include topics such as climate change, science, ethics, and humanism, aspects on which Martí left a legacy in his work and actions. In this regard, the director of the José Martí Project Office, Eduardo Torres Cuevas, said that the event seeks to develop values for the conservation of the planet and the human race. Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at the account at teleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back from the south. In Mexico, authorities declared an alert in the northern region due to rains and snowfalls that caused the death of at least 4 people. In this context, the Meteorological Service of the country warned that the recent rainfall could generate floods and river swelling. The agency indicated also that in the next hours more rains are expected, as well as a frigid environment in the states of Baja California, Chihuahua, and Sonora. Meanwhile, the government of Baja California suspended schools in some municipalities after the intensive precipitations resulted in mudslides. On Tuesday, 11 Argentinian provinces, including the capital city of Buenos Aires, are on a yellow alert for a heat wave. Temperatures of up to 35 to 40 degrees Celsius are expected. Tucumán were under weather warnings this morning for temperatures that could be dangerous, especially for infants and people over 65 or with chronic illnesses. Citizens are advised to stay hydrated but to avoid caffeinated, alcoholic, or sugary drinks. Authorities urge people to avoid exposure to high temperatures as well as physical activity, and to wear light fabric and light colored clothes, along with eating fruits and vegetables. In France, Hurricane Gerard left several localities in the north without electricity, while over 20 regions of the country are under orange alert. According to the meteorological authorities, 75,000 homes in the north have been left without power, including the Ile-de-France region where Paris is located. 23 different regions in the country are also under an orange alert following the second wave of strong winds and heavy rains with risk of flooding. Meanwhile, much of the rest of the European country is under a yellow alert due to winds of almost 160 kilometers per hour. Speaking at the World Economic Forum in the Swiss Alpine village of Davos, Brazilian Finance Minister Fernando Haddad reaffirmed that his country will grow again above the global average.
If we have the right agenda and rebalancing our accounts, you can be sure that Brazil will grow again above the global average. While the world's GDP grew by 2.5%, Brazil grew by 4.1% during the 8 years of the Lula government, and that's what we want to go back to, being able to grow above the global average, with more social justice and looking at how to preserve the environment.
China's Vice Premier Liu He called for more attention to the negative spillover effects of major countries' interest rates hikes on emerging markets, referring to the United States Federal Reserve decision to raise its benchmark lending rates.
We call for more attention to the negative spillover effects of major countries' rate hikes on emerging market and developing countries, so as not to add to more debt or financial risks. We also stand ready to work with all parties to find solutions to the debt issues for some developing countries.
On Tuesday, the Colombian President Gustavo Petro advocated for his defense minister Ivan Velázquez, who served as an authority on the disbanded International Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala. During an interview upon his arrival in Zurich to participate in the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, the Colombian president expressed his full support to his defense minister. The Special Prosecutor's Office Against Impunity accuses Velázquez of allegedly endorsing the effective collaborator agreements of the three former Brazilian executives in the bribery case of the construction company Odebrecht in Guatemala. In this context, the head of state said that he will not allow the reputation of someone who has fought against corruption to be damaged.
It is only through ruptures such as those initiated by our Minister Velázquez in Guatemala that societies manage to discover paths of greater transparency where they can truly be the owners of power and not to the criminals who react. We are not going to allow that in this reaction. We are not going to allow that in that reaction, assuming a position that had to do with the United Nations, with transparency, honesty. He is attacked for what he has done. He is persecuted for his fight against impunity. He is cornered by those who exercise that impunity. So we will defend him. He will continue to be our minister.
The United Kingdom, a small group of trans rights protesters gathered on Tuesday to express their anger and disappointment after the government exercised an unprecedented veto to block a new law passed by the Edinburgh Parliament. The UK government will block Scotland's controversial gender reform bill, a move that, according to Scotland's Secretary Alistair Jack, is likely to set up a legal showdown between the two governments. The legislation makes it easier and faster for people to officially change their gender in Scotland without the need for a medical diagnosis, and lower the qualifying age from 18 to 16. It also reduces from 2 years to 3 months for 16 and 17-year-olds the time needed for an applicant to go by their new gender before it is officially recognized.
Absolutely, they're lying when they say it's about anything other than transphobia. Section 35 has never been issued in 25 years of devolved government, yet this issue, overwhelmingly voted in by Holyrood, a bill that was checked, triple checked, and built to be, to be within the Equality 2010 Act framework. There is nothing about that act that will overrule or damage the Equality Act as it stands in the UK. It is completely within the devolved jurisdiction of Holyrood. They made sure of that.
This is a particularly dangerous step. Seeing the UK government step in to stop Scotland from improving their gender recognition reform basically says that the UK government is so committed to not letting trans rights improve within the UK that they are willing to damage their reputation and their relationship with Scotland to do it.
Archaeologists in Norway said on Tuesday they have found a runestone which they stated is the world's oldest, making it several hundred centuries older than previous discoveries. The square brown sandstone rock, measuring about 30 by 30 centimeters, was found during the excavation of an ancient burial ground in late 2021 in northern Oslo, ahead of construction on a railway line. Carbon dating of bones and wood found in a grave beside the ruin suggests that it was inscribed sometime between year 1 and 250 AD. We have more news coming up after a final short break, so don't go away. Welcome back from the south. In Malawi, some schools reopened on Tuesday after being closed due to a cholera outbreak. According to local authorities, schools in the Malawian cities of Lilongwe and Blantyre are reopened after the Ministry of Health closed them for 2 weeks due to a cholera outbreak that has affected the entire country, with the two cities the hardest hit. The impoverished southern African country has recorded nearly 18,000 cases of the disease and 595 deaths since March 2022. In what the UN says the largest outbreak to hit the nation in 10 years. However, despite the reopening measure, the Ministry of Health declared that the start of the school year for primary and secondary school pupils in the capital Lilongwe and the southern city of Blantyre would be delayed by at least 2 weeks.
We are encouraging them to wash their hands frequently. We have in buckets where will be put water to wash their hands and soap. We also have disinfectants, chlorine for cleaning the toilets and the classrooms. We are discouraging the learners to buy cooked food around here. We are encouraging them to bring already cooked food from their homes, but mindful to wash their hands frequently before taking their food and when after visiting the toilets.
The 16th Congress of the Polisario Front received several letters and recommendations from international political parties and figures in which they affirmed their support for the right of the Sahrawi people to freedom and self-determination. The letters received by the Congress came from Asian parties with which the Polisario Front has historical and long-standing relations, such as the Revolutionary Front for an Independent East Timor, the Timorese Party of Unity and Progress. It also received letters from parties on the African continent, including letters from the head of the Algerian party, Voice of the People, a letter from the head of the Mauritanian party, Nida Al-Watan, and another from the Socialist Party of Ghana. From Latin America, the Congress received letters of solidarity from the Revolutionary Party of Panama, the Socialist Party of Uruguay, and the Communist Party of Ecuador. The 16th Congress of the Polisario Front began on January 13th and concludes this Tuesday, January 17th. On Tuesday, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the number of fatalities caused by a bomb attack on a Pentecostal church this past Sunday rose to 14. Meanwhile, the number of wounded people has also risen to 63. The Islamic State claimed the attack, saying it was in retaliation for government military operation against them. The explosion took place as the preacher was delivering his sermon, and its consequences were brutal according to witnesses. Violence has wrecked eastern Congo for decades, as more than 120 armed groups and so-called self-defense militias fight for oil, influence, and money. The Moroccan Association for Human Rights denounced the increased police violence against sub-Saharan African asylum seekers. The main Moroccan human rights organization denounced on social media the confrontations taking place in several regions as Moroccan police arrested 6 migrants from sub-Saharan Africa on Monday during an evacuation operation of migrant camps in Casablanca. This area has been a scenario of tensions between asylum seekers and authorities who conduct operations to evacuate camps near the Oulad Sian bus station in the city. Located at the northwestern tip of Africa, Morocco is a transit country for many people, particularly sub-Saharan, seeking to reach Europe from its Atlantic or Mediterranean coast. Palestine condemned the systematic violations and attacks by the Israeli army against the population of the occupied territories, together with the escalation of Jewish settlers in the region. The Foreign Ministry denounced in a communique the expansionist plans of the new government in Tel Aviv, headed by Benjamin Netanyahu and considered the most right-wing in the history of that nation. The ministry questioned the projects to legalize 65 outposts built by settlers in the West Bank and occupied territories since 1967. Even though the UN and the world considers that all Israeli settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem are illegal, Tel Aviv authorities distinguish between those authorized and those that are not. According to different sources, more than 450,000 Israeli settlers live in 132 settlements and 147 outposts in the West Bank, while another 200,000 live in East Jerusalem. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries kept the projection for the growth of the world oil demand unchanged at 2.5 million barrels per day in 2022. According to a report by the organization, the forecast for world oil demand growth for 2023 has also remained unchanged at 2.2 million barrels per day. In the countries that are part of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the increase will be 0.3 million barrels per day, while in the countries that do not belong to the organization, growth of 1.9 million barrels per day is expected. Likewise, the OPEC added that for now the current forecast is surrounded by uncertainties, among them world economic events, changes in the COVID-19 moderation policy, and geopolitical tension. we've come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.